Right then guys, I promised you a bit more E36 content. Here it is. There is the old Hulk sitting right there right now. She is now devoid of her engine. Yep, there's nothing in there, and she is about to go to the big scrapyard in the sky. So I have got the recycling people coming in about an hour's time. I'm going to hook it up to the E36 328 and I'm going to drag the bastard up the top of the road. I'm going to get rid of the shell. So goodbye old E36, we will see you and we'll thank you very much for what you're going to do for us. Hello E36, stroker build, let's get on with it. We'll be getting into the garage probably pretty soon. We'll start taking the engine apart. Maybe I'll show you about that. Stay with me, we'll get in the garage in a bit and we'll see what happens. Okay, so as it stands, this is the engine as we've got it now. I'm sorry about the light in this garage. This fucking GoPro is shit. And it makes everything look like I'm standing in pitch dark. I'm actually not. I've got a huge fluorescent light here. I have this fucking massively bright flashlight here. I have another huge fluorescent light here. And if I take the flashlight away, you'd think that I was standing in a bog of eternal stench. Anyway, the engine as it stands has still got ancillaries on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start removing the power steering pump, the oil filter housing, which is just in here. The crank pulley bolt has already been loosened off. I'll be taking the thermostat housing off, the idler pulley on this side. Basically just undoing a whole load of nuts and bolts, guys, you know, so there's nothing really much to it at this point. Once I've done that, I'll take the engine mounts off the sides, and then I'm going to come around this side here and I'm going to get rid of the exhaust manifolds that are just over here. So I'll get cracking on with that and then I'll show you what it looks like when we've got the block. Basically as a long block with an intake manifold on it. Right, so for the first time in a long time, we've got a nice clean spot, man. No more E46. Bye bye E46. Clean spot here as well. Fucking hell, that's pretty unusual. Right, let's get in the garage and show you what we've done here then. We've now got a long block. There you are. Completely stripped of pretty much everything and ready to be torn down. The only thing that's on there is crank pulley, Vanos solenoid on this side here, which you might be able to see. So around this side we've got no exhaust manifolds. It's bare. It's ready to have the head taken off, the sump taken off, the crankshaft out. I've left the coils in because I'm going to have those coils, so I don't want them getting dirty. And then around this side, as you can see, there is nothing as well. No oil filter. So I have actually kept a few bits. Let me just show you what we've got. Over here we have oil filter housing. I think that's the same as the M52 one. Someone might correct me there. We'll check that out later on. Idler control valve. Pretty sure that's the same fitment. So I think we might have a spare there, but needs a bit of a clean. Vanos solenoid. Don't have a clue if I can use that or not, but I've kept it. We'll have a little look at that. Power steering lines and power steering pump. I'm going to try and use them on the 36 if we can. Fuel injectors, completely useless for me, but worth a little bit of money, so we'll sell them on and accrue some of our costs back. Manifold bolts, always a fucking nightmare. Might want to keep them. This little doobry. Now, if you're in the UK, you might not know what this is if you own an E36. If you're in the US, you certainly will know what this is. This is the SAP air blocking plate. Secondary air pump is a system which feeds air from the intake, I think, back into the exhaust to allow the cats to warm up faster. Correct me on that if you know better than I do. Basically, it's an emissions related thing that a lot of American cars have. Some of the 46s have in this country. The M3s definitely do have it in this country. So the reason I've kept that is we are going to be deleting it on Natalie's M3. And I'm fairly hopeful that this is a blanking plate that I can use. If it's not the end of the world, but I'm not chucking it because it's already made for me, man. I've even got a little gasket and the nuts and a little bolt. So we'll hang on to that and we'll see how we go. The only other thing I've kept is a bunch of old wiring. Guys, I can never tell you enough how, you know, wiring can and can't be useful, but it's one of those things that if you chuck it, you end up wanting a plug from it. Now, there's knock sensors in there that I think I can use in the 36. Someone again will correct me on that, but I'll check them out. There's also a bunch of wiring for the crank sensor that's at the back of the block there. Now, on the later model E36s, on US E36s and on the M54s, crank sensor is taken from a pickup wheel on the back of the crank. If you've seen my video about Nickel engines, you'll know that that's one of the ways on a UK car you can tell if it's got a Nickel block or not. Go and reference that video if you've not seen that. I would like to try and convert my car to run off that crank position sensor. Because of the way that I run my engine maps on a US M3 map, I have to have misfire detection disabled so that my trigger wheel doesn't trigger misfires all the time. Also, with the M54 crank having the trigger wheel on the crank, I might as well use it, man. I'm going to look into keeping the crank pulley from the M54, keeping the wiring related to that crank sensor and working out how to adapt it. Now, before you scale me down here, I do know that that crank sensor runs off a 12 volt feed, not a 5 volt feed like the UK crank sensor does. That needs to be converted, and if you've done your research, you'll know that there was actually a recall done in the US where they gave you a conversion harness and they connected the crank sensor up to the Vanos solenoid and to a few other things. It doesn't look that complicated, so I'm going to attempt to try and recreate that with the wiring that I've kept from the M54. The shit's free, man, so I might as well give it a shot and see what happens. I don't think it'll make any difference really, it's just to make sure that I've got a tidier package, and it's a bit easier and cheaper to pick up those crank sensors, so in the long run it might be a wise move to make. We'll see how we get on. Here is my M54. So as you can see, pretty standard fare. I've got it set top dead centre right now. The two things I want to mention are that's as the engine cam cover was removed. In other words, there was no vapour barrier on top of the intake camshaft. You can see here, this is the upside down of the rocker cover, and you can actually see where there's a hideous amount of vapour that's gone on to this side. You can see it looks kind of matte in the video compared to this side, which is a bit shiny over the exhaust. The back of the oil filler cap there is absolutely filthy. So that's a bit curious. Someone's obviously been in this engine before, probably I would think to do a rocker cover gasket, and forgotten to put that back. I don't think it's caused any damage to the cams. They look like they're in good nick, and I'm only after that one anyway, so I don't really give a shit about this one. You can see that the engine hasn't had as many regular oil changes as it should have had. There's rather a lot of varnish on this engine. The actual Vanos unit itself is completely black, where it should be white. Let's see if I can get a wire brush on that and just give you an idea. So yeah, underneath all that grime there is actually a silver Vanos unit. Again, not that I give a rat's ass, because I'm not interested. And then the final thing that I'll show you are the spark plugs. They are BMW spark plugs, so they have got BMW branded on them, so they obviously were probably done at a BMW dealership, I would expect, and they look pretty fucking toast, man. I'm going to actually look these up, but that contact tip looks like it's disappeared in the middle there, and are long overdue to be changed. Once again, this engine was needing a bit of love, and will be reincarnated into something much better and nicer. At this point now, I've taken off all the rocker covers. You can see the coil packs, the spark plugs. As you can see, they're all sitting down here, keeping all the bolts because you never know when they're useful. I've set the engine to top dead centre, so you do that. I don't know if you can make this out. It's right about there. So there's a mark there on the cam, sorry, on the crank pulley. There's a mark there on the timing chain, timing case, and then usual sort of fare here. So at the back of the engine, 2 dots on the upwards of the cams, front cam lobes pointing towards each other at 45 degrees. I will not be removing the cams like that. I'll be turning the crank about 30-45 degrees to the left to release the pressure on some of these caps, and then we'll get in there, but that's to come later on. At this point, I'm going to remove the Vanos unit, which is unplugging a couple of these plugs here, getting in, there's a couple more Torx bits in there, and then undoing the bolts around it, pulling the Vanos unit away, and then from that point, I'll remove probably, I think, the timing chain cover, and then start thinking about getting the timing chain off and taking one of the cams out. Okay guys, progress has been made. We have the cams out. Bish bash bosh. There is a bare M54 cylinder head. So over here we've got intake cam, I think, exhaust cam, can't remember which is which. Both looking fairly tasty still. No big worries about them, no real bad scoring, as you normally using one of them, so anyway, there we go. All the cam trays and the lifters, all the cam caps, they're actually pretty good as well, very little scoring in them, not again that I'm using them. We might have got the head bolts out, all the associated Vanos gubbins, and the head is actually loose, ready to come out. Things have progressed somewhat. She's bare. We've got a few bits on the bench that I'm going to show you in just a little second, but before we get there, this block was pretty filthy. But the hone marks are still on the boards. You can't see them in this image, man, because it's fucking pitch black in here, but you'll have to trust me on that. It really wasn't that bad looking inside, and the wear on the tips of the valves, the actual head itself, apart from being filthy, it looks pretty damn good. So let's get to the good stuff and show you the treats. So here we go then, cats. This is now our stroker kit. M54 B30 crankshaft, M54 B30 intake camshaft, M50 B25 non-Vanos intake camshaft as the exhaust. Eagle eyes will notice if I turn this so the dots face upwards, the cam lobes don't point the right way. So this has to be clocked by roughly 62 degrees, something like that, so that it sits roughly, well, it will sit exactly the way I want it once it's in the car, but it's got going to sit beautifully well once we're happy with it. Either that way or the other way around, can't remember. This will have to have 2mm, I think, shaved off the end of this. This will have to have 5mm shaved off the end of the Vanos engagement. The pistons will need to be cleaned, new piston rings, new bearings in the con rods, new shell bearings, and then we'll put it back together. Before we leave the subject of the disassembly, I want to say there's a reason why I've not gone into the disassembly. There are plenty of good videos for that. Go and check out Shop Life TV. He's done a really cracking video tearing down the M54 B30 engine. Far better than I can do, because he's got a lovely lit workshop in America, I think. And he makes some cracking videos, so go and check out his channel. Crystal clear disassembly of the M54 B30. I will be honest, I've watched quite a lot of that myself. I've watched all the videos I can get my hands on, because that's how I learned how to do things. Before we leave the video, I'll just show you the bearing shells from the M54 B30, indicating the health of the crank. They're in really good nick. I'm not disappointed with them whatsoever. All the crank journals look pretty sweet, albeit covered in oil at the moment. The cam journals don't look too bad. As you can see, there's a tiny bit of scoring on them, but that's fairly standard with these engines, all the way back in the series. So I'm pretty chuffed. I've got some good parts here. I'm going to stick them all together. Let me just get back in the light so you can see my wonderful face. Oh yes, there we go. So it's time to get rid of a lot of the shit that we've got in here. The garage is full of crap. I'm going to get rid of the engine block, get rid of the cylinder head. Once I have cleaned everything up, I will be getting the cylinder head out. I'll be doing a little bit of port matching on that, nothing too crazy, just taking off casting marks, making sure everything's nice and clean, there's no flash lines. I don't believe there's a lot to be had in doing that anyway with those heads. I'm going to take all that stuff to the machine shop. The intake camshaft, the exhaust camshaft and the head all need to be machined. Little nip off the nose of the intake cam, 2mm off the exhaust cam, and just a skim on the head just to make sure it's perfectly flat and not causing any problems. I'm hoping, if the boss is watching this, that he might allow me to bring the cylinder head down at work and see if I can get it penetrant flaw detected to make sure there's no cracks in it. We do that in aerospace, guys. That's something that's done day to day in our workplace. So if I can find a quiet time, I might go in there with a little bit of bribery and see if he'll let me do that. And yeah, whilst that's all happening, I'm going to rebuild my Vanos from the 323, do the rattle ring, do the seals, clean it all up, take it down to work, clean that stuff up. And then it's really gather parts, get my block out my car and build this damn thing. We're still a long way off. It's going to be slow progress. I'm not rushing this and I'm not putting any time limit on it, but I'll keep wilting away at it. We've got the parts now, man. We've got the engine apart. Let's get rid of the rubbish. Thanks very much for watching. Sweet Paymo out.